So on today's session, huge topic where it's all around line management and leadership, mental health. And what we know is that line managers, leaders play a huge role when it comes to the mental health and cultures within our organizations. And whilst line managers, leaders might make up 5 to 10% of our whole organization in terms of the volume and the number of employees that we have, we know that they play a huge role, and you play a huge role in being able to build the best cultures possible for our teams to thrive within. Now, what we know from the data is that 56% of people within our organizations are experiencing low mood at any given time. We know that financial stress has really increased across the last year. There's a bit of an aftermath after COVID and everything that's happened for myself, and I'm sure across everyone that's joining today's session. And a really frightening statistic that I wanted to share with you, and we're going to move away from the stat side of things to things that are really impactful that you can take away shortly, but a really frightening statistic from the Workplace Health Report collated from millions of data points across the globe in organizations like yours is that 9% of employees are experiencing thoughts of self-harm or suicide at any given time. And that's a really important thing to acknowledge, first of all. But second of all, in the next hour, I'm going to share with you what you can do as a leader and as a line manager to be able to reduce that statistic to support the team going forwards. Now, something that I want to acknowledge is there's so much pressure on you as leaders and line managers. As a leader myself, I feel a lot of pressure, and I feel a duty towards the team that are really pushing forwards for the organization to thrive. So what I don't want to do is to put more pressure on top of you. I almost want to take that pressure away to be able to share what we can do that's within our control, but also highlight the areas that are outside of our control that we may not actually be able to support with, and where those boundaries lay as well. Now, this webinar has been put on today, and I'm back to doing what I love doing. And I've not delivered a live session like this in a long time. Normally, it's a panel where I get to pick the brain of some amazing experts. But we were speaking as a team, and we thought we need to be able to get this session to you around culture and well-being for you as line managers and leaders, and for me to give back to a community that's given me so much across the last 5 years since I founded Champion Health. And so we thought, what better opportunity than on Time to Talk Day, whilst that was a couple of weeks ago, to deliver this live session. And no surprise that we've had 750 signups for today's session. And so what I really want to do is to give you practical things that you can take away, and for the chat to pop off. If there's anything that you want to really discover on today's session, then would love for you to be able to ask that in the questions and in the chat feature, and we'll be able to get round to them. And one thing I wanted to touch upon as well before we really kick off is that we're not asking for perfection within here. I'm not a perfect leader or line manager. I'm learning every day. We're just looking for small, gradual improvements going forward. So that's a really key area. Don't put too much pressure on yourself today. If you can take away one thing, then I've done my job, and we've all done our jobs going forwards. So if you're able to just pop in the chat what you want to get out of the session, we're able to then tailor that around you. And please do use the chat as we do go through the session. I'll try and get round to certain comments as we go through, but also I'll be able to hopefully pick up on them at the end of the session too. So I'm Harry Bliss. For those of you that don't know me, I know so many faces on today's session, and I know you know a lot of my backstory, but I'm about to share that with you. For those of you that don't know me, I founded Champion Health 5 years ago, with the mission of making well-being more inclusive and more accessible to a global audience. And I'm really proud to say we're in 120 countries globally now, supporting over 2 million people with mental health, but all other areas of well-being. And we bring it into one unified place with our team of 140 health and well-being experts. And we do this from a hybrid approach through technology, and using the technology to scale across companies and get the mass levels of engagement, but then also the human interactions that we know are so important. And I'll touch upon a little bit more around what we do towards the end. But really, to kick off today's session, I wanted to share with you my why. And what I want you to do whilst I'm sharing this story with you is just to reflect on your why when it comes to why you want to create the best culture within your organization, and why you want to support the well-being of not only yourself, but also of the people around you going forwards. So this is James. James was someone that was a huge catalyst within my career. I wouldn't be talking to you today if it wasn't for the support and the help that James gave me right at the very start of Champion Health. And I had this grand vision of building the Netflix of wellbeing, of conquering the world, as you do as a naive founder. And I needed a bit of support from the operational side of things. And James was the youngest director on the FTSE 100 at the time. His career had gone from strength to strength. He had an amazing wife and 2 kids, and it was the best trade I've ever done, where I traded my cricket coaching skills for his mentorship. His mentorship was around £2,000 a day. He charged 0. My cricket coaching was about £20 an hour. And he supported me. He gave me so much time, so much advice that I'm going to implement with you today. But the reason why I share with you the story is James was a leader within his organization. He was someone that was thriving. He was the life and soul of the party. And I wouldn't be talking to you today if it wasn't for James's help and support. Now, this is where the story takes a turn. James, tragically, 4.5 years ago, almost to the day, ended up experiencing a 2-week bout of stress and ended up taking his own life. And this is my why when it comes to well-being. How can we help people like James that are well and thriving, as James was for so many years within his lifetime? But then how do we also get to people like James that may be struggling? And if we are in James's position, that we know 9% of people within our organizations are at the moment of experiencing suicidal thoughts or self-harm, then we can know what to do, what to say, and where to go as well. So that's really the objective of today's session. But what I want you to do now is just reflect on your why when it comes to this topic, as to why it's so important to you. And all of us, I'm sure, will have our own specific whys. Now, what I'm not going to do is go through the importance of building a healthy culture that leads to high performance, because we've got 376 people on today's session. You all know that that's important. That's why you've signed up for today's session. So there are 3 objectives that we've highlighted that we want to achieve from today's session. Objective number 1 is to build and maintain a culture of positive mental health at work that leads to high performance. Objective number 2 is to improve and maintain your mental well-being as a leader. If we don't take care of ourselves, really hard to take care of the people around us. And that's a lesson that I've learned the hard way as well. And I'm going to share with you in a very vulnerable way the mistakes that I've made and the things that I look to do now, and I look to continually work on as a leader and a line manager, because again, none of us are perfect. And the third thing is then what we can do as leaders and line managers to support struggling colleagues. But it goes beyond colleagues, it goes to friends and family members, and the training that I'll hopefully give you in today's session will be really transferable across them. And you can see some of the research bodies that we've taken the research from, and we've worked alongside professors within clinical psychology all the way through to organizational psychology within here, to be able to cram into an hour so much information for you to take away. So whilst it may be quite overwhelming, get a pen and paper out, make a few notes, and see if there's one thing that you can take away from today's session. Now, to kick off, the first area is how we build and maintain a culture of positive mental health at work. And the first thing I wanted to identify was there's a lot of pressure on us as leaders and line managers within the macroeconomic environment and within our organizations as well. Now, there's a lot of pressure from new generations coming through with expectations around mental health, talking to them around specific areas, all the way through to how we've navigated COVID, the cost of living crisis. There are so many areas that are compounding and can lead to a lot of pressure on us to begin with. And I wanted to acknowledge that. And again, my objective is to be able to reduce that pressure, to give you the things within your control to be able to support your teams to thrive going forwards. But a really key area that I'm going to talk through today is not only well-being and mental health, but a huge facet of that is culture. And without culture, we can't drive positive well-being. And without positive well-being, we can't drive positive culture. Now, one example of that is within a thriving culture, we're much more likely to live with positive mental health. For example, the team are thriving. You're able to talk openly about how you're feeling. Psychological safety is going to be something that we talk through today. And similarly, with positive mental well-being, we're able to lift others up, not put others down, and be that drain on energy levels. And that's really what culture is there more energy given by individuals across the organization than energy zappers? And that's a really simple formula to just identify where your culture's at. So it's a bi-directional relationship. They both feed each other. And I've heard a lot of debates of, does well-being sit within culture? Does culture sit within well-being? They sit hand in hand together and are hugely interlinked. So that's one important area. And we're going to go through culture in a significant significant way. Again, this could be a university degree, and we've managed to cram it down into an hour-long session. And the next thing is, being a leader is hard, but I also want you to recognize that it's a privilege to be in a leadership and line management position, whether we're there now or whether we're joining this session because that's where we want to be. It's really hard work, and I don't want to shy away from that. But what a privilege it is that we can be a role model to other people, to support them to thrive, and then filter down their knowledge as they grow within the organization, they get promotions, etc. within there. But we need to make tough decisions, and we can't shy away from that. Something that someone shared with me that was one of my mentors in the very early stages of Champion is that we need to be ruthless on the issue, but kind on the person and the people. And so we don't want to shy away from those tough decisions that we do need to make as a business and a business leader. We need to make sure that we do support the individual all the way through here. And I think that phrase is really important, to be ruthless on the issue, but kind on the person. Now, one quick exercise that I want to see throughout the chat is, what characteristics did the worst teacher that you've ever had possess, and how did that make you feel? So it might be that they put you down or sniggered at certain comments. For example, they didn't listen to you. What I'd love to see across the next 60 seconds or so is, what did the teacher that had the least impact, actually a negative impact on you, possess at school? And then on the flip side, what did the one that had the most impact on you that you look back at, and I have one that I'm going to share with you, what did they possess? How did they make you feel? What kind of culture did they create in the classroom? So I'm just going to pop across to the chat feature, where I'd love to just look at some of the comments within here. They're flying in. So we've got culture of fear, judgmental, and made me feel incompetent. My geography teacher so mean, picks on me in class, I hate geography. And so you can see straight away, Louise, your association with geography now is off the back of that. No respect from Frankie, not being listened to was the worst. I've absolutely had that as well. Julia, not believing in me, and the best believed in me and encouraged in me. Name calling from Julia as well. Didn't acknowledge achievements, never acknowledged the good. Fear, not communicating. Uninterested bully. So let's look at some of the more positive areas now as well, where the teachers really lifted you up, and the ones that you look back on and you thought they were wonderful within here. I'm trying to keep up with all of the comments within. So I'm going to scroll to the bottom. Kindness, patient and approachable, open. So you can see all of the things coming in within here. Really interesting to look at them. I'll give it another 30 seconds just to be able to get some. I'll highlight some now. Honest and helpful, encouraging and believed in my abilities, approachable, encouraged me to keep learning. So curiosity is a really interesting area. Jasmine mentioned my economics teacher was very supportive. Economics was the one class that I absolutely loved at school, and that was because of the teacher. Best maths teacher gave me extra work to satisfy my hunger, and so meeting your needs within there as well. Gia's also mentioned calm understanding, changed pace of learning. So the reason why I've done that exercise with you is that that's one of the most powerful exercises that you can do as an individual. And the best teacher probably did these things. And Alex from Champion Health's not just been typing these out into the PowerPoint today. These were all things that we looked at within the research of what the most effective line managers possess and leaders possess within organizations. So we've had answers of met your needs and requirements. We've had answers of understood your challenges, your wants, your needs, how to tailor that to the individual. We've had answers of made things fun, used humor within there, knew the boundaries, they were consistent in what they said. So they didn't treat certain individuals that are really good at sport in PE different to the individuals like myself, for example, that may not be very good at PE, for instance. They were non-judgmental when they spoke to you. And so they gave you an opportunity and a platform to speak openly, and they gave you the freedom to express yourself. And I can see so many more comments coming in. So thank you for engaging in that short session. And really what this encompasses is the term of psychological safety. So this is very much an academic term that's come into the mental health sphere and the organizational development sphere lately. All of these things are around psychological safety. So that's the umbrella term for meeting your needs all the way through to giving you the freedom to express yourself. And the one thing, if there's one thing that you can take away from today, is you've just written down on a piece of paper or on the notes section within that Zoom chat, you've just written down a contract for yourself as to how you can be the best leader possible. So avoid being that teacher that took the energy away. be that teacher and be that leader within your organization. Of course, they're not children that you're leading, they're adults, but all of the same principles are within there. And the moment that someone did that exercise with me, a professor within organizational development, it really made me sit back and go, yeah, that's exactly the leader that I want to be. I want to be like Mr. Gibbs, my economics teacher, that lifted me up, that gave me the inspiration to go further, that pushed me at the right times, but put his arm around me metaphorically at the right times as well. So all of those things really important for leadership and line management. So a great exercise to do, and loving seeing all of the comments rolling in as well. So the next key area is going through the 9 most important factors according to the research as to what the best leaders possess in an optimal culture. So we're absolutely flying through. Hopefully there's one thing you're taking away from today around be the version of your teacher that really impacted you going forwards. But what I'm going to do now is go to the research off the back of what the University of Oxford, the University of Cambridge, the LSE papers are suggesting the 9 most important factors are for you to be the best leader and to create an optimal culture. So number 1, sorry, I just had to take a quick breath. Number 1 is understanding human psychology. Now, we're seeing the likes of ChatGPT coming out at the moment with incredible advancements in AI. And inevitably, that will lead to certain roles that don't require emotional intelligence, just require IQ or mundane and repetitive. Certain roles will be made redundant in the next 10 to 20 years. But as I've identified straight away, it's the roles that require emotional intelligence, EQ, that are going to stay and require human beings going forwards. And undoubtedly, it's the leaders that understand human psychology, the leaders that knows what get people out of bed in the morning. It might be a salary, it might be progression, it might be a challenge, for example. It might be a burning desire. For me, it's to prevent another instance like James from occurring, for instance. And so how can we be a leader that really understands the human psychology, that can pick up on the small nuanced behaviors that are really hard within remote working environments, but yet if an individual's not responding in the way that they normally would, if they're not joking, laughing around, that's a small warning sign. And we're going to go through what we can do when those warning signs appear. But if you're not an emotionally intelligent leader, that's something you really need to work on within here, because that's what the most important leaders do possess. If we look at the Sir Alex Fergusons in the sporting world, all the way through to the Bill Gates within the business world, understanding business and human psychology, is one of the most important things for business outcomes and for us to be an effective leader and line manager. So really reflect on the people that you're responsible for, what makes them tick, what makes them fire, and what makes them get out of bed in the morning, and then cater to that. And point 2 really ties into that area that we're all individual. What makes me tick doesn't make the person opposite me tick necessarily within my organization. So the more we can have a really nuanced approach to management of understanding individuals' needs, wants, challenges. And if you don't know what they are, ask them. It really is that simple. And if they feel comfortable, if you built psychological safety around you, if you're that teacher that you've mentioned in the chat previously, individuals will share with you their wants, their needs, their challenges. And again, we want to then cater around what they are. So humans aren't robots. We're all individual within here. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. That's the number 2 area when it comes to the most impactful leaders and line managers. Number 3 is really one that I learned the hard way. And I've come from a fairly privileged background whereby I'm a white middle-class male that's been born able-bodied. I went to a state school, but the state school was in a good area. And the quicker that I understood that not everyone is in the same position that I am, and the quicker that I understood that I can give other people a leg up that have got they've had a less privileged upbringing, but they have a brighter brain, they've got more opportunity and potential, the faster that the organization started to grow and we started to create a really impactful culture within here. And so it's not a starting line in the 100 meters that's flat all across here. Everyone's starting at a different point, and the most impactful leaders will be the ones that recognize this and are able to cater to those demands and see potential in people, that we might have someone here and someone here, but this person could really thrive with a little bit of help and support that's nuanced to them as an individual. So no one starts in the same place. Again, that's a really important thing to factor in when it comes to building a thriving and healthy culture. The fourth area when it comes to this topic is around consistency. And when I talk to my friends that are frustrated in the cultures, and the cultures then impact their well-being and their mental well-being within their organizations, it's normally to do with a lack of consistency, especially on what is said is not what is acted upon. And congruency is a really important factor within our organizations, that if we can marry up the words with actions, that's really powerful as to creating those optimal cultures. Now, it's very common. We might have done it within our organizations. I've definitely done it within mine, where we've made huge statements to the team, such as our people are our most important asset. Now, fortunately, we've not had to make any layoffs, but many organizations that have made those statements lately, because it's a business and we need to run a business effectively, have had to make layoffs. And those people are then saying, well, our people are our most important asset until the going gets tough. So what I really encourage us to do within our organizations is not make these grand statements, but really make grand actions. And so under promise and over deliver. What we can often do within our communications is over promise, under deliver. So make sure what we do is what we say, and what we say is what we do. The consistency within there is vital. Now, one other example that I'd love to share with you is in recruitment. And we've learned the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to recruiting. Every business, and the more that I've seen it this way, is actually a recruitment business, because it's people that make our business what they are, it makes our business special, is if we can share with them the honest challenges within the actual working day to day. We've just recruited and had an increase of headcount of 20%, which with each of those individuals, we shared with them the nitty gritty, the ugly bits in the day-to-day job that's within any job. Normally, we love to really big up and dramatize. This is amazing. This is a great opportunity. You've got growth opportunities left, right, center. Joining us will mean you'll X, Y, and Z. And upgrade your life, for example. We make it really clear as to what the nitty gritty looks like for them. So the honeymoon phase doesn't peak and then trough. We're able to just consistently be really level with them, and they're able to know exactly what they're getting themselves in for. So again, congruency, really important factor when it comes to our communications. And again, just have a think about how you can apply consistency into your culture and into your roles. Number 5 ties into number 4 of consistency, and this is around clarity of communication. Of course, we don't want to just scream into a megaphone and yell out loud. And a really important factor within communication is not just sharing the good stuff. And that's what the best leaders are able to do. They're able to share some of the challenges that we've got to overcome and the mountains that we've got to climb, and take the team along with us when it comes to those communication areas. And so even if people disagree with a specific outcome, there are certain things that I've done that the team may not have done. But what I always will pledge to do is to explain to them why we've made those decisions. And if I've not explained it in a group setting and they're not comfortable with it, they can come to me and I'll explain it to them as to why that is. And I'll always justify it from a business angle and justify it from a human angle as well. So that's a really important area that we may make unpopular decisions across our team. Again, layoffs is a big thing that's happening across all areas of the industry at the moment. But if we can justify why that's happening, if we can bring our employees on that journey, trust will be built within there. And trust is a really important factor that we're going to go on to on point 7. Now, point 6 is one of my favorites within here, that a little laughter decreases stress and improves productivity dramatically. And you may have remembered in the peak of the pandemic over in the States, there was someone that was at a court hearing. And there was a violation that may include a jail term within here, and they turned up as a cat to that specific hearing. So this is an extreme example that just popped into my mind when we were putting together these slides. But on a less extreme example, on our day-to-day, our jobs are serious, our businesses are serious. If you're working in the NHS, as many of us are that are joining today's session, or we're working in healthcare or construction, our jobs are really serious and people's lives depend on it. But what we need to ensure is, if we're creating psychologically safe environments, we need to include a little bit of laughter here and there as well. So your role as a line manager is to create that space whereby people can be their whole selves, can have a little bit of laughter here and there. and that will decrease the stress and improve productivity. And what I want you to do is to reflect back on when you've not felt comfortable in a culture. Have you, A, felt like you can laugh, and B, have you laughed? The answer to both of those is likely to be no, unless it's quite uncomfortable laughter when someone's made a dodgy joke or a slight remark, for example. And so look to really use laughter in the right way across our organizations. And that's something, again, the research is really clear on, that it can improve productivity, culture, and also reduce mental health challenges across the organization. Now, point 7, I touched upon trust. And trust is one of the most important facets when it comes to building a culture. And I'm a big believer that trust is not earned. Trust is there right from the very start until people give you a reason not to trust them within there. So I make that clear to every single member of the team that joins Champion, that I will trust you implicitly until there may be a reason not to, and then we'll talk that through and we'll bring that up. And Simon Sinek, world-leading author, many of you on today's session will be aware of Simon Sinek's work around organizational development. He went to talk to the Navy SEALs, one of the highest performing organizations globally. They're responsible for other people's lives across that organization. And he said, what's the secret to success for you, to one of the commanders? And they said, the most important thing is we always value trust over performance. And that was something that really made him reflect on it, that they look for high trust across teams rather than high performance across individuals. And they would rather have someone of medium performance and high trust than someone that is at moderate performance and high performance and moderate trust. Now, of course, we want to be here within our teams where we've got high performance, high trust, but this is really a key area and a key catalyst over this specific area. Of course, we don't want to have low performance, low trust, but if we can really look at our teams and go, who are the people that are lifting other people up, not the people that are high performers, and we can think of those individuals, especially within sales departments, that then put other people down, and so they're not hitting their quotas or their targets, for example. This is a really key construct for, again, building an impressive culture, an optimal culture, and high levels of mental well-being. So really evaluate who are the people that are leading to trust across the company, across our team, who are the people that are bringing other people with them, that are boosting their energy levels, and how can we get more people like them within our team? And if there are these individuals, look to really stamp that out early on, and so we can keep them as high performers, keep them hitting their quota if it is in sales, but we can build the trust. The moment that we let things slip early on, if we let things slip that are really simple, small things, that will then lead to a huge catalyst of other people thinking that's okay, because this person will be a role model to anyone else that's joining within their teams. Number 8 is around listening. And a lot of what I used to do was listen to respond. And when I started to listen to understand and listen intently, I had to think less. And a lot of the answers were in front of me from what the team were saying. And that's one of the biggest challenges that I think employees do face, is being heard in an environment whereby it's quite hard to get heard. Now, a lot of us run engagement surveys and cultural surveys. Nothing engages employees more than asking them what they want. Nothing disengages them more than not acting upon it. So if, again, the congruency is there between words that they're saying and then the actions that we're able to follow, if we're not able to do something, again, communicate as to why that is. It goes back to that transparency of communications. But if we can listen intently to what they're saying and we can build cultures around what they're saying, that's going to be something that's really impactful. So listen intently to what employees are stating about the culture, because they're the ones that are really forming that culture. A lot of what we look to do is top down with our values, and we state these are our values, but actually a lot of culture really is bottom up, and listening is going to be absolutely crucial for that. And the final area, and number 9, when it comes to building that high performance team that can lead to good culture and positive mental well-being, is the culture's only as good as the most disengaged person across our department or across our team. So really double down on working hard, listening to the individual that is the most disengaged person, communicate, double down with them, because if you can lift them up, that's a really special thing for them to then branch out and lift other people up as well. And so it's the whole rotten apple and the apple cart analogy, that if we can support them, if we can really get them to start singing from the same hymn sheet, that's a really powerful thing for our culture going forward. So just have a think back to within our organizations. It might not be a toxic individual, for example, that's really putting other people down, but who's the most disengaged individual within your team, and really look to understand them, understand their wants, needs, challenges. Often it's challenges outside of the workforce that they just need to be heard. Sometimes it may be challenges with you, and that's something that we've got to face up to and look at ourselves in the mirror as leaders and line managers, as tough as it can be, and really front up to specific things. That way we get them engaged, we get the rest of the team engaged within there. So they're the 9 specific areas. We just rattle through them. So understanding human psychology, making sure that we don't operate a one-size-fits-all approach, recognizing that humans aren't robots and we're able to individualize our way of managing teams, recognizing that no one starts in the same place. The quicker I understood this, it was absolutely vital to then lifting up other people as high performers, and that high trust element that we've touched upon, making sure that we're consistent and we're congruent in what we say is what we do. If we state that our mental health of our team is absolutely vital, make sure that we really are then practicing what we preach within there. Make sure that clarity of communication is there for them. Even if it's things that are tough to communicate, make sure we communicate those tough things. The more we sweep things under the carpet, the more that tumbleweed will start to happen, and that snowball effect across our teams. Make sure we can include a little bit of laughter. The best way to see if you've got a psychologically safe environment is if you've got a team that are laughing, and a team that can joke alongside each other, and then a team that can get on with the job when we need to as well. That's absolutely important, of course. Number 7 from Simon Sinek is make sure that we value trust over performance. Of course, performance is important, but trust for a high-performing team to create a high-performing culture is the most important factor off the back of what the Navy SEALs and the research is suggesting. Number 8, listen intently to our teams. Look to speak 20% of the time and listen 80% of the time. That's going to be a theme when I go on to how we can support our teams with their mental health. And then look at the most disengaged person within our department, listen to them, really double down on what their needs, wants, challenges are. And that way they will lift up other people and they'll do the culture piece for you. So all of that will have a big effect on mental health. So now let's go through to mental health in the workplace. So I'm going to touch upon in the next 10 or 15 minutes, we're great for time, I'm going to leave 10 minutes for questions as well that we can get through to. The next 10 minutes, I'm going to go through how we can support the people around us. And the final 10 minutes is how we can support ourselves as leaders, as line managers within our organizations to be the best versions of ourselves and to create the best versions of other people within our team. Now, one of the really important areas within here is to recognize that mental health lies on a continuum. Now, from one day to another, I change from struggling to thriving. Some days I'm content. Hopefully, I really don't slip down into crisis, but we know 9% of our teams are in that crisis stage at the moment. But our mental health isn't fixed. If we have a diagnosis of a mental health disorder, that doesn't mean we're always struggling. People that are living with depression, and when I lived with a challenge around my mental health, I sometimes had days that I was thriving, had more days, unfortunately, that I was struggling, but I was able to move up that continuum. But what I want you to see this as is a flowing continuum rather than a fixed continuum. And you can see what some of these areas mean when it comes to crisis, so severe anxiety, self-harm, suicidal thoughts. That's on the left-hand side, all the way through to thriving, whereby we've got the ability to relax, we feel content with ourselves, we're able to cope with change. And change management is a huge area that many organizations today are focusing on. Again, that's why mental health is so important to navigate that change, because if we're content and thriving, we're much more likely to succeed on that rather than on the left-hand side of this continuum. So that's the first area. And the second area is that we spend statistically a third of our lives at work. And if that frightens us, that might be a reflection on the cultures that we work within. That hopefully brings you a bit of excitement as to I can have an impact within here. The other 2/3, we spend statistically a third asleep, depending on how good a sleeper you are, and a third in our own home environments and social environments. And naturally, we bring the 2/3 of the stress out there from the financial stresses, the care and responsibilities that many of us are facing across the workforce. It may be bereavement, for example, all the way through to relationship breakdowns, we naturally bring those anxieties into work. And whilst as a leader and a line manager, that's not your responsibility, and you do need to have healthy boundaries within here, and we'll go through what they look like, that's something that, again, you can listen to the individual, you can support them in making sure they feel heard, because for many people, stress in the workplace isn't actually caused by the workplace, it's caused from outside. And I just wanted to recognize that we're all human. I bring stresses at the moment. I've got care and responsibilities that I'm facing. And naturally, I bring that into the workplace and across into the team. So I communicate that to the team, make that really clear, because we've got a great environment. And so they understand that actually Harry may be having a bad day because of X, Y, and Z, and they can put two and two together. So what is your role when it comes to supporting the mental health of your team? And again, go back to that analogy of the bubble bursting and the balloon bursting right at the very start. Your role isn't to diagnose, to treat, to be a psychotherapist, to be a GP. Your role is to be an effective leader and line manager in creating the best culture and the best opportunities for your team to thrive within. And when it comes to mental health specifically, your role is to support, to signpost when necessary, and to listen. And we're going to go through a 5-step process of to what you can do if you spot someone in your team that may be struggling. But what we don't want you to do, I need to double down on this message, is to think that you can then say that it sounds like you've got a mental health disorder of X, Y, and Z. That's for the experts to do. So don't take that pressure on yourselves. The biggest thing is that you can be compassionate. You can listen to them in an empathic and empathetic way within here. So what is the goal for you as an organization around mental health? For too long, it's been reacting to problems. The goal for us is prevention and early intervention, to keep people on the right-hand side of that continuum that we touched upon. But inevitably, there are always individuals, 25% specifically, that are experiencing some level of moderate to severe anxiety or depression at any given time off the back of the workplace health report that we launched in the last couple of weeks. And so these are some of the warning signs, but you've taken on so much information today that actually I just want to give you one warning sign today to look out for. And the real warning sign is that if something doesn't feel right, it often isn't. And I spoke to, again, a clinical psychologist recently, and I was saying, look, there are so many warning signs. We actually rattled this down from 200 warning signs all the way through to around 30 within here. I said, how do I distill a message to an individual instead of giving them a list of 200, 300 warning signs to look out for? They're so busy being line managers, being leaders. And he said that if something doesn't feel right, it often isn't. So if someone isn't cracking the jokes that they normally would, on the flip side, if someone starts acting quite erratic, for example, may even start cracking jokes when they normally wouldn't, their appearance may change significantly, they may not be looking after themselves, there could be anything. But you know, when your gut just says something doesn't feel right, this is when to go through something called the class approach. And this has been devised by professors of clinical psychology around mental health. And this is a 5-step process that you can take away to be a really effective leader and line manager when it comes to mental health. So you've spotted the warning signs of someone that may be struggling, and you then need to go through this process. And I'll talk you through it. And Alex from Champion will also include a blog for you to be able to read after this session to refer back to. You can send it across to your teams as well, so they know what to do if someone is struggling. And the first letter of the class approach is C for connect. There are 2 ways that that connection can occur. One way is that someone comes to you and says, I'm really not feeling right at the moment, or I'm feeling a little bit off, or it may even be more colloquial than that I'm feeling crap at the minute. And that's the opportunity to then go through to the next letter of listen. Now, another area of the connection, and this is more common, is that you spot the warning signs of someone that's struggling. And this is where Time to Talk Day is such a powerful initiative across the globe and has led to huge cultural change within our friendship networks, across our organizations, around connecting with people when you spot the warning signs and asking them twice if they're okay. And so saying to an individual, are you okay? The often response is, yeah, I'm absolutely fine, because that's a question that we ask normally. If you then ask for the second time, really simple bit of advice, ask for the second time, are you really okay though? You might want to include, I've just seen that your workload seems to be building up. You seem to be slightly stressed. Is that something that's going on in your life at the moment? that's when you give them permission to then open up within there. So you might want to refer to what the warning sign is for that individual, or you might just want to ask, are you really okay at the moment? And that gives them the permission. I'm going to share a real life example that I found and that really did change my life shortly when we get through to the final letter. So you connect with that individual. If they say, I'm absolutely fine, they're adamant that they're absolutely fine. You don't want to push them and push them and push them. That's not what we want to do. And so they feel the pressure. They might be struggling, but they might really not want to open up, but they might want to open up in a week's time. So that's when you leave the door open. You say the door's always open. You might want to check in with them again in a week's time to connect with them again. Just say, just wanted to check in off the back of our conversation last week. Just wanted to check that everything is still all right. And that again gives them permission. They might have thought it through, and they may then open up. Now, for an individual that does want to open up within here, that's when we listen. And listening intently and speaking for 20% of the time and listening for 80% of the time, that Pareto principle that always seems to apply within our working lives, we want to apply that to listening as well. And so if we're able to ask reflective questions, repeat back what they've said so they feel heard, that's a really important factor within here to show that compassion and show that you truly care. Now, I'll give you a few phrases that you can use within here around connecting, such as asking twice. But if you don't do it in an empathic and a compassionate way, and you do it in more of a robotic way, for example, but you're saying the right things, but you're not really congruent in what you're saying, you're not showing that compassion, the individual won't open up, and it could do more harm than good. Show them that you really care in your body language. Reflect back on what they're saying, I've heard this. Is there anything else that you're thinking through within X, Y, and Z? And so you can just keep that conversation going. And again, that snowball effect within there. So listen for 80% of the time, talk for 20%. The A is around assess and assessing the situation within here. So first of all, if you're concerned about their safety, and concerned, and this is a really important thing to mention, concerned that they may be experiencing crisis and suicidal thoughts. Asking the question of, are you experiencing suicidal thoughts, will not put the thought in their head. It will do the exact opposite. So that's a really important area to acknowledge within here, that we need to assess the situation. If they say, no, I'm absolutely fine, I'm not thinking of that, it's just I'm finding it really hard with my wife, my partner, finding it really difficult with workload at the moment. That's when we want to, again, go back to listening, ask more questions on that area, and then it goes through to support. And so we support often during the conversation. We're there for them. We might want to put an arm around them metaphorically. If the relationship's right, you might want to give them a hug, for example, but that's the judgment that you've got to make within there. But we need to support them during the conversation and then after. So drop them a quick message, check in with them again, because things do change. Going back to that continuum, they might have moved to the right or to the left-hand side of that continuum. So look to continually check in, and that shows again that you truly care. And the final S is around signpost. And when it comes to signposting, you want to signpost if someone needs expert support that you can't give them because you're not a GP, you're not a psychiatrist, and you're not a mental health expert. If it's a non-crisis situation, it's very likely that your organization has an employee assistance program that's anonymized, it's free of charge. They're wonderful programs that aren't utilized enough. If you're in the UK, follow these areas. And if you're global, Alex will put in the chat right now one of the first solutions, and we've launched this free of charge, a global signposting area. And so if you're experiencing suicidal thoughts or anxiety or bereavement or gambling issues, for example, we've got a signposting directory that you can access if you're based in Italy, or if you've got a remote team over in the States, for example, that your teams can then click onto and access. And I'm really proud that the team have launched that. And we've already had feedback that it's really helped people that are experiencing crisis, which that's what it's about. Similarly, if they are experiencing crisis, it might be in the UK that you want to text shout. This is a text messaging service, been really effective for men that don't want to phone up, like the likes of the Samaritans. If they're not safe to be on their own, if we're in a remote environment, we may want to contact an emergency helpline, encourage them to go and see their GP, for example. But if we're with them, stay with them until they're safe and take them to one of these areas, whether it's calling an ambulance or whether it's taking them to their GP. So really important areas. This recording as well, I need to note, will be available for you going forwards, and we'll also send through that class framework. I think Alex has already done that. within the chat. And so you can come back to this if you do experience a situation like this. It's fairly unlikely, but again, going back to that statistic that almost 10% of our teams are experiencing crisis at any given time is absolutely frightening. So hopefully this training could quite literally be life-saving. So the class framework, the class approach, really impactful. Share this with your team. Go back through it tomorrow just to check your learning within there, but connect with an individual. Again, that connection can happen from them coming to you if they feel safe enough to do so, or you connecting with them. Listen, assess, support, signpost. My tutor at university went through this when I was about to drop out of university. I was experiencing really dark thoughts myself. The biggest thing that he did was listen in a compassionate way. He spoke for 20%, listened for 80%. He signposted me to the right services, and I made a full recovery off the back of that. And I'm much more towards the right-hand side of that continuum. And so I've seen firsthand the impact that this process can have across our teams. So the final area I just wanted to touch upon, and I promised that we'd leave a few minutes back for questions as well before we go through to the how we look after ourselves, is around you are a role model within your organization. And so building a culture of proactive mental well-being, building a high-performance culture, people will look to you in what you do. And if you don't show healthy vulnerabilities, if you don't show that you're human, if you're fine all of the time and you're operating like a robot, your team won't come to you. You won't build that psychological safety. The people that can be human, show that they make mistakes every now and then, that's much more likely for your team to then be able to feel like they can open up in that culture. It might not be to you that they open up. It might be to one of their colleagues, for example, but you really set that tone as a role model. And that was the final thing that I really wanted to touch upon within this specific section. So fourth and final area is around supporting your own mental health as a leader and really practicing what we preach when it comes to our own mental health. If we don't take care of ourselves, very hard to take care of the people around us. And I found this firsthand at Champion when we were going through the acquisition, for example. We were working long hours, as every organization has to at some point. I was finding that I wasn't putting myself first. That meant that I missed warning signs across the team. It meant that I wasn't as compassionate as what I normally am at home and at work. And it was having an impact on all areas of my lifestyle and on my productivity as well. So that's hopefully something that I can share with you for us to be able to really prioritize our own mental health as a leader. And we've put out a lot of fires across the last couple of years as leaders. There are many things outside of our control, such as geopolitical wars that are going on. There's been the latest earthquake in Turkey and Syria, which is just frightening to see across the globe. That's having an impact within our mental health and across our teams, no doubt. All the way through to the likes of COVID-19. There's a new generation of workers coming through that we're having to adapt to, and rightly so, and they may have different expectations that can be really healthy and challenge certain protocols within our organizations. And so there's so much going on within here, and we've been firefighting. So that's the first thing that I wanted to recognize. I didn't just want to preach at you within here and say you need to look after yourself. I wanted to recognize how much is going on. But when it comes to supporting your own mental health, we've got our final framework of the day, and we love an acronym at Champion Health. And Alex will send through again the Champions framework to you in a blog that you can go through to get the 9 steps to be able to support your mental health. Now, there might be something outside of here, such as working on your relationships with your partner or with your kids, that's going to aid your own mental well-being. It might actually be around financial well-being, that you really need to look at your finances. You may be experiencing debt at the moment, for instance. But from the research, these are the 9 things that I can apply on a broad brush to all of the 750 people that have registered for today's session that will really impact your mental health. So again, if you can do one of these things, just make that small contract. I'll do one of the things. My one is going to be the S that we'll get through to at the end of the Champions framework. If you could do one of these things for the next week and then continuously work on it, this will boost your mental health going forward. So the C stands for connect, exactly the same as the class framework. Look to connect with those people around you that really do lift you up, and make sure we have the right support networks around us within there. Human beings, we're social animals. Even if we're introverted characters, We still need that connection as human beings within here. The H is one that we often ignore, but is a really basic, fundamental human need of hydration. There's been studies that show atrophy, and necrosis of brain cells, so shrinking of the brain and then death of brain cells when individuals aren't staying adequately hydrated. I need a sip of this shortly when we get through to the chat feature, because my mouth is definitely quite dry from all of the talking. But make sure that we've always got some water in front of us. We're prioritizing our hydration. Have a glass of water as we go to bed, so when we wake up in the morning, we can have a pint of water or half a pint of water as we wake up, and that will lead to neurogenesis, the growth of brain cells, and growth around the healthy growth around the brain for our mental health. The A is activity, and exactly the same thing. The activity or lack of activity can have a huge impact on our brain and on our mental health. Studies have shown activity can be as effective without the side effects of antidepressant medication, and coupled with antidepressant medication for moderate symptoms of depression, it can have a huge impact. So look to do some kind of activity. If you're not active at the moment, small changes in that can make a huge difference. Look to stand up every half an hour to hour to make sure we move our body, because our musculoskeletal health is really intrinsically linked with our mental health. So look to move, find an activity that you enjoy, get outside as much as you can within the working day and as much as your organization does allow for. The M is being mindful, and this isn't necessarily practicing mindfulness itself with an app. Being mindful is being in the present moment. If we're living in the past, that's often around, you may experience the likes of depression. If we're living in the future, that's what anxiety is, the fear of the future. If we're living in the present, that's what mindful and being mindful is within there. So ground yourself in the present moment as much as you possibly can. Easier said than done. And this may be something you want to research after the session, but that could be a whole session in itself. The P is around being proactive regarding our mental health, not reactive. Look to really support our mental health and nourish it whilst it is in a good place, if it is in a good place, and look to act upon it right now. If you are struggling, contact your EAP, speak to those that you trust around you. Trust me, that will have a huge impact going forwards. The I is around seeking the right level and not too much information. We're living in an information era whereby I've got BBC News articles pinging on my phone. I turn on the telly, there's news there. People are talking about the news, and fake news is spreading 4 times faster than real news, especially on social media outlets. And that's leading to huge issues, especially within certain demographics. So look to limit the right sources and the right amount of information that you're taking on. And that way, that will really have a huge impact upon your mental health. The O is being open about your mental health, be willing to talk about it. The N is around nutrition. And so eating well, the gut-brain axis is hyperlinked. So how we feel is connected to what's going on in our gut significantly. And so the more fiber that we can eat, if we can eat the rainbow, when I told my 7-year-old nephew that, he thought that meant Starburst and Skittles, which it definitely doesn't. So the quicker something goes off and the more green, the more colourful it is in terms of that rainbow, the better it is for us. So seek high fibre foods as much as you can. And that has had a huge impact on people's mental health from the research that's out there. And the one thing that I'm working on is prioritizing my sleep. And that's the final letter, is S for sleep. Sleep has a huge impact on the way that we restore, the way that we process memories, the amount of times where I nearly made an irrational decision, I've slept on it. The sleep has allowed me to process everything that's gone on, and I've made a much more rational decision the next day. It's absolutely remarkable. And again, we could have a whole session on sleep within here. So that's the Champions framework that you can follow. Try one of these things. But if you are struggling, do 3 things. First thing, look after yourself. Do those areas. Be active. Be mindful, as mindful as you can be. Look to talk with other people. I can't even describe how much of a difference that made when I was struggling with my mental health. People refer to the weight of the world lifting off your shoulders. That felt literally how it felt, which was remarkable. And then look to visit a professional. And again, use that global signposting directory if you're from outside of the UK joining today's session, and talk to a professional. I know that waiting lists are quite lengthy at the moment, and that's something that really needs to be tackled. But look at your EAP, ask your organisation, is there counselling support provided if you're unaware of it? So to end this session, to go through to the Q&A, we've got 5 minutes left for that. You play an important role in supporting the mental health at work, but I don't want this to add the pressure. We know that the pressure's there for us as leaders and line managers, but look at the things that we do control. Go back to those 9 areas. You'll get the recording tomorrow that you can refer back to. And that way you'll create an optimal culture that can lead to better levels of well-being across our team. Culture is key and communication must be consistent. If we can have the congruency with words and actions, that can lead to special things within our culture. The goal when it comes to mental health at work is prevention and early intervention, not reacting when it's too late when someone's off sick. We may need to do that. There's 2 to 4% statistically of our team off sick at any given time. Let's also focus on the 96 to 98% that are in work too. The penultimate area is support your own mental health. You can't pour from an empty cup. The oxygen mask analogy that's often referred to on the airplane of put your own oxygen mask on first. As a leader, line manager, that's absolutely vital for you to perform, for you to be compassionate and spot the warning signs. It's not selfish to take care of your own mental health. And the final area, the one exercise that I love doing today, and just I love seeing the chat popping off throughout there, is be the leader that your teacher was, your best teacher. And on the flip side, the teacher that you thought just, didn't do any good for you, didn't do any good for other people. Avoid those traits. They're the leaders that we don't want to be. And it's amazing how similar that is when it comes to effective leaders and line managers across our organizations. So I'm going to pass over to a quick Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and see, oh, wow, there's so many comments within here. I've not managed to keep up with all of this. Julie said, thank you, Harry, for being vulnerable. And then thank you for all joining and listening to all of these areas. I'm going to scroll right to the bottom. Tim's mentioned, is there a summary of the 9 things the best leaders possess? There isn't at the moment, Tim, but I'll make sure we create one. So I'm sorry, Alex, who's put in so much work for today's live session, especially to make it free of charge for you. But if you're able, Alex, to follow up with those 9 things, that would be absolutely wonderful. So Tim, we'll get that through to you. Lots of thank yous, which has made my day. So great to hear all of these things. We have had a question in the Q&A Alex has mentioned. When people are being open with us as line managers, what is the best way to support them as a person out of a moral duty, but maintain boundaries as their manager at work? So there's definitely those boundaries. What we don't want to go into is being that psychotherapist, suggesting solutions, suggesting what they need to do, for example. The biggest thing is just to listen to them, show that you're there for them, say, look, there are certain things that I'm not able to do, but that's where the expert help is. And then signpost them to that, and then just check in, just ask them, and in the right environment, that's really important. You don't want to do it in an open forum around a board level table, for example. We've heard horror stories of that. Within a quiet environment that they feel comfortable within, just ask them, did you manage to speak to them and speak to the experts? I was thinking of you over the last few weeks and hoping things were all right. And my door's always open. You might do one-to-ones, and that's a really important thing that we do at Champion Health with our team, to check in with them. We're a remote first organization, even though we've got this beautiful studio behind me. We're a remote first organization. The one-to-ones are the most powerful thing we do for the mental health of our team, because it gives us an opportunity to just check in and continually say, I know we said that this was a big challenge. It was workload last month. How are you finding things at the moment? And what can we do to be able to support you further with that workload and with the things that are inside of our control? So that's something that I'd just recommend from the question within there. Lots more fab sessions and thank yous within here, which is amazing to hear. So we've got another question. Wellbeing is a passion of mine. I think it's more of a statement, and I want to develop on what I deliver to the workforce. CPD and looking at my own steps may help my understanding. Fantastic. So there's a huge level of self-awareness coming through within here, which is a really important area of us being the most effective leaders, line managers going forwards. Eleanor, hello, Eleanor. I know you from school, actually, so great to see you. Has just asked a final question of, would suggesting mindfulness apps such as Headspace, Calm, diet, exercise, sleep apps to help mental health appropriate, or should we leave that to medical professionals? That's a big part of what Champion do. It's really powerful. What we need to do within our organizations is couple individual behavioral change interventions, such as these apps and platforms that recommend in a personalized way how the individual can benefit and personalize their own well-being journey and aid a positive mental health journey that they're going on. that needs to be coupled with line managers taking responsibility and the culture being focused on. So that really is the Champion Health business in a nutshell, is how do we support the individual first of all, and then how do we support the organization in being able to create the right culture for them to thrive going forwards. So I can catch my breath now. And what I'm going to do is just say a massive thank you, first of all, to Alex. Alex has done so much behind the scenes. You can't see him at the moment, but I'm sure he's got a cheeky grin as he normally does behind the camera. Big thank you to you, Alex, for putting on today's session, for preparing all the slides, for the research team at Champion, for doing all of that research on all of those key areas. It's something that I don't do enough now. We're a team of 140. We've got an amazing team that does deliver it, but it's amazing to connect with you as our community, to really go back to where my roots started of delivering these sessions, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. If you're curious about learning more about Champion, about more of these sessions, about more around the platform that I've just touched upon, and organizational change and culture, especially through these hard times, I'd love to talk to you. The team would love to talk to you. We're a friendly bunch, and we just want to be able to have a legacy and have an impact off the back of the story that I shared right at the very start. We're putting on these sessions every month. Follow us on LinkedIn as well for more updates, more tips that we've shared today, and follow me personally, and hopefully we can connect if I've not met you before. And if I have, great to see you again on the session. Have a wonderful day, and we will follow up in the next 24 hours with the recording, and you can send it on to your teams. Take care. See you later.